Yo, 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 what's good? What's good? Let me know, anybody out there, let me know if y'all can hear me good. I'm driving to get this paper, but man, I got something on my mind. I was kind of thinking a lot about this particular idea last night. Pretty much talking about or thinking about why men need the upper hand. You know, um, I've been seeing a lot of talking points, especially against guys that travel, specifically attacking some of the reasons why, men are more and more saying, you know what, I'm getting my passport and I'm checking out another country. So, our talking points is from a travel perspective is that, you know, men ultimately want to provide, want to feel needed. That's the natural, innate um, feeling for a man is to feel needed and to want to protect what's his. And in order to do that, it has to be a dynamic where a man makes more or is able to provide more than a woman. So it's not necessarily seeking your financial equal counterpart. Now some men that, in my opinion, that kind of hate or have a rebuttal, they try to say men are being weak if they can't be with or handle a woman that's making the same amount of money, or men are looking to exploit or have control over women, or leveraging or being able to leverage their finances, for sex or anything else. You know what I mean? So we hear that a lot and a lot. And so I'm just going to break down kind of where why they have a point, but I'm going to destroy that point after but first I'm going to try to bring highlight to the points they make. So here's the thing, right? So imagine a society which we pretty much currently are in now, but imagine a society where everybody had the same amount of money. Everybody was the same. Everybody, let's just say everybody had a house, everybody had a car, everybody had access to the same type of food, whatever. The only difference is just every individual, how they look physically, personality, etc. So just imagine that everything in the world. So there's no other countries that's better. Everybody in the world is the same. So just imagine that scenario. So from a dating coach standpoint, now if everybody the same, then yes, the only thing that's gonna separate you from another man is probably going to be physical attributes, and in a certain extent, game. So people that got a good mouthpiece, people that are have attractive physical features that women seek, and then also your ability to fight. So that's why Andrew Tate. Shout out to Andrew Tate. That's why Andrew Tate um, brought up a lot. He highlighted the good things of being able to fight is ways men compete. Men used to be able to compete for women. In society right now, being able to fight doesn't really matter because a woman could a hot blonde could be with a bodybuilder and leave him for some frail pretty boy. You know what I mean? Because there's so many protections and things like that, so men can't compete on that level. But back when there wasn't no protections for the weak, you know what I mean? A frail pretty boy ain't finna take a woman from, you know what I mean, let's say a bodybuilder or something like that. So what Andrew Tate was trying to bring back the mindset of, getting back to masculine order, where the men that had the brawn, the brains, etc. You know what I mean? They had first, they had first dibs, and then everybody else had the leftovers. So if all else is equal, like I said, if all else is equal, um, women still like tall men. So if everybody made the same amount of money, like I said, had the same house, same car, or whatever, women would just choose based on looks. So let's say women wanted the tall men. So okay, so a lot of tall men would probably get chose in that situation. Dudes that got game or a good mouthpiece, those men that get chose as well. So the problem is, so from a dating coach perspective, it's like, okay, you got to use the strength that you have to get women. But the problem is, even in a situation where everybody make the same amount of money, women women get bored. Women get bored because even a man that may be part of that 14% of men over 6 feet, she's gonna get bored with that. She's gonna want a different man that's 6 feet. A man with a game, you know what I mean? His At some point his game might get old. You know what I mean? So a new voice is always gonna be attractive. So my point is women naturally are going to get bored and want something different. Especially if you got them at a young age. You know what I mean? So and trying to be with them for the rest of your life, like they're gonna want variety, but they don't admit that. But women want variety. So even in a situation where everybody made the same amount of money, everybody had the same financially, women didn't depend on men financially and vice versa. It still would not create an environment where relationships would be stable. So that's where um, the dating coaches logic fails, because it nothing promotes stable relationships. So what you have in that situation is gonna be chaos. You're gonna have women have proven through divorce rates that women get bored, and the only way um, women tend to stay in relationships, and somebody brought it up, but they tried to bring it up like as a cheap shot. But they say, women stay in relationships because they don't have you know because they don't have a choice when a man is a sole provider. Those are the times where the marriage rates was the highest, divorce rates was the lowest, is because there were situations where women couldn't leave. You know what I mean? Um, then they stayed for survival. So when you take away those barriers where women don't need to stay for survival, you create a culture where women will leave a relationship when they bored or when they feel like it. And so it'll be a society where everybody playing musical chairs, and we will still be in a position where we're not creating families. You know, families create strong communities. Communities build strong nations. You know, and this is why I believe that religion played a big part in social order. You know, because if everybody made the same, if everybody was the same, and you created a situation where women didn't depend on men financially, and women can just play musical chairs with relationships, what else is there to maintain order or to keep women to be more, how should I say, committed, or women to be more, or to not change? The only thing that kind of could keep women in check was religion. And now we live in a post-religious society, so a lot of women have looked at religion as another form of oppression. You know, so I mean, so I was thinking about all those things, and then I also was thinking about you know the fact that the only countries in the only countries or regions in the world where I would say that is not in a post-religious state is like, if you a Christian, Ethiopia probably has, I mean, probably still practice Christianity, I mean, where people respect the religion. I mean, as far as Christianity goes, and as far as like Islam goes, um, I would guess to say the Middle East. I mean, I know there's some. I'm not really, too versed on, Islamic religion. I know there's different philosophies and facets, but my point, I'm saying that as far as like where people are following it, and practicing it, and it controls I mean, it controls their life. I mean, they're letting the religion control them. So in the U.S. in Western societies, we are in a post-Christian, post-Islamic era. You know what I mean? So religion does not control or dictate anybody. You know, you see it in churches. Men have thrown in the towel. Churches haven't kept, they don't keep women accountable for their actions, and no one, anything that's in the Bible that contradicts what a person thinks, what I mean, they rebel against it. So we are in a post we are in post Christian nations, and then people I know that in the Islamic faith, they say it's the same thing in Western societies. It's the same thing. So so I I try to figure out what is the solution for people that are against men traveling. You know, in this current, what is the solution? Because if guys didn't travel, if guys didn't stay in the U.S., they got to deal with one. They got to deal with one, dealing with women that are not going to allow themselves to be controlled by religion. So that's out the window. Men tend to be loyal by nature because we want to be able to chase the bag. We don't want to be using our time to chase women or to have a woman. And so every time a woman wants to leave a relationship, you gotta, men need companionship. You gotta stop or slow down your grind to find and pursue another woman before you can really put 100% on getting to the money. So that's why a lot of men tend to be more loyal in relationships and marriage, because we to the bag, and we don't got time to be trying to chase women to satisfy our physiological needs. So if religion is out the window, religion can't control, or religion can't put checks on men and women, then the only other thing dating coaches would just say is that, well, you got to use your strength. And like I said earlier, is that whether you tall, physically attractive, whether you can fight, whether you have a mouthpiece, women still will get bored with that. And they will say, well, okay, well, just move around. You know what I mean? So we all just gonna be playing musical chairs, having sex with different people, having babies. We're going to have an unstable society, and I don't think that was the intentions of you know of our existence to just be smashing and just pretty much a reckless society. It's just not a formula for being being a strong nation or even being a strong group of people. Speaking to African Americans. So in conclusion, men need, we to have order. Men have to be in a position where we can create order. I'm a believer that God chose men to create order, maintain order, and restore order. So the only way as a man you can really have a sense of order is if you're in a dynamic where you are in control. So whether there's only two ways to be in control as a man, either physically, which we can't be physically controlling a woman, or financially. So um, for a survival and stability standpoint, it makes sense for a man to be in control financially because we have, because we are more sensible and logical about life. We don't just, you know, for the most part, men aren't concerned about just sleeping around and changing women like women are with men being very, looking at them as very disposable. So yes, men need to be and travel to be in environments where the dynamic gives men the natural, put men in their natural order, which is to lead and be in control. So that's what kind of maintains at least the individual aspect of stability. So once so we need more men, to travel to maintain or to maintain at least what's left of the world as far as having some type of stable and social relationships. Now, some people may say, well, you can't build a nation if half the men are overseas marrying women or starting families over women. They're building those other societies. So it is what it is. Like I said before, we're at a point of no return, at least as far as the black community and men in Western societies are going to follow suit. So all these countries that are more patriarchal, more masculine dominated, more and more men will create families and build, and ultimately build those nations slowly. I just looked at the visa requirements for Colombia. They made an update, and other countries are doing it too, like the digital nomad visa. And part of the language in there was saying that we the reason why they wanted to have these digital nomad visas is because they want more um, intellectual information to be pretty much transferred in their country, meaning that the more people that have certain skill sets and it's passed on to people in that local country, like it ultimately helps the country overall, because they are getting smarter and smarter and therefore being able to build, a stronger economy and things of that nature. So financially with tourism, we're adding to the economies as well. So a lot of men that's traveling out these Western countries all over the world, like we're slowly building those countries, you know, and it's going to be more evident probably like 5 or 10 years from now. The effects of men just saying, you know what, we're tired of building, we're tired of building here. So But yeah, so I just pretty much wanted to just kind of talk about like, yes, men do need to have the upper hand. You know, a lot of people don't want to say it because it sounds maybe chauvinistic, but or or misogynist, or how you say misogynist. But men are or else the world is going to be in chaos if everybody made the same amount of money. But fortunately, due to the greed of how should I say this? To the greed of oppressors and I'll say even say white supremacy, capitalism keeps people poor. So capitalism keeps people rich, the few rich and majority poor. So there's always going to be that dynamic of men with means versus women without means, and the men that and the situations where men and women make the same and are dating each other is just never going to be stable. That's why in the United States, women have made it clear that they don't want a man that's equal as them because there's no point. They'll smash them. They'll have a baby by him, but as far as that man having any type of order or for that relationship or marriage to last a lifetime, it's just not in their benefit to do that. And so people that travel, we get that. It's nothing to argue about or complain about. If I make, hypothetically, if I make $50,000 a year and my female counterpart that makes $50,000 a year, if she rather be with somebody that make more money, that's cool. So I could mess with a chick in the U.S. that makes $20,000 or $30,000 a year, or I could go to a country and mess with a chick that makes $0 to $10,000 a year. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it's still a dynamic where the man has the upper hand. The only issue with a man even dating a woman in the U.S. that makes less money than him is that once they have a child together, she has the upper hand. So she pretty much can suck his resources where she don't even need him financially no more. She got him. She got her 20,000. So you make $50,000 a year. Let's just say she was making $20,000 a year, and you have a baby buyer. So now your $50,000 a year. Let's just say you paying $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. So um, she's pretty much going to be sucking, you know, an extra $10,000 a year, more or less. So her income goes up 30,000. Your income goes down pretty much to 40,000. And so it's a win-win for her. She gets to sleep with other men. She gets to have her child and legacy, and yeah, and you pretty much to her you suffering, so it empowers her because you're not living your best life, so she doesn't feel regretful for leaving that relationship. So it's just better to just deal with a woman overseas, you know, because you'll always have the upper hand if you make more money, and that's just how things are supposed to be, to have social order. But yeah, let me know what y'all think in the comments. This is my morning rant, and I'll catch y'all soon. Peace out.